we are going to get started. We're going to just jump right into everything right after I call the roll. We have a quick announcement from DYCD, and then we're going to roll right into the Buildings Commissioner presentation, which I believe is being led by Sean, right? You're okay. All right, so I'll call the roll. Community Board 1? Community Board 1?
Yes, present.
Community Board 2?
Present.
Community Board 3? Community Board 4?
Present.
Community Board 5? Community Board 6?
Present.
Community Board 7? Community Board 8? Community Board 9? Community Board 10?
Present.
Community Board 11?
Present.
Community Board 12? Community Board 13?
Present.
Community Board 14?
Here.
Community Board 15?
Present.
Community Board 16?
Present.
Community Board 17?
Present.
Community Board 18. All right. So we're going to go right into it, like I said, and our first presentation is by DYCD on paid internship opportunities available for spring and summer. So you guys want to come up?
It's not a touch screen.
I love this program.
All right. Hey.
Hi everyone, good morning.
Good morning.
Hi everyone, my name is Dulcie Andre. I am the Director of Employer Engagement and Partnerships at DYCD. Just here to talk to you all about summer youth employment, but more specifically our Ladders for Leaders program, which falls under the SYEP umbrella, but the processes are a little bit different there. So I'm happy to be here to share some information with you all. I'm sure everyone in the room does care about youth and youth employment, so I'm happy to share some more details there in regards to the efforts that we have going on at DYCD. But before I begin, just a question to lighten up the room and throw something out there. Who in the room has had an internship opportunity in the past? Not as much as I thought. Does anyone want to share their experience with that internship and how it influenced where they are today?
Actually, my first internship was in college at Mega Everest, and every job that I've gotten after that was through the network that I developed at Mega, including this job.
I don't know if anyone else wants to share.
I had an internship during high school for the New York City Council. Ultimately led me to a career at the council and in government. So it was very valuable.
Great. Kind of same as you, I interned with our city council out in Boston for 4 years while I was in college, and I've been in government ever since. So all to say, internships are very influential for our young folks. So we'll talk about how you all can get the word out and how you all can assist not only with participants who are interested, but also businesses that may be interested in hosting interns. So I'll just jump to the presentation. So our Ladders for Leaders program, we're actually entering our 10th year of service to young folks. Again, Ladders for Leaders falls under the SYEP umbrella, but the focus is a little bit different where we're looking at employer-paid internship opportunities within corporate businesses. While we do also work with our nonprofits and our city agency partners, the true focus is making sure that we are engaging employers that are able to pay our students directly. And we also focus on many different sectors for the Ladders for Leaders program. The focus is providing youth with a professional, relevant work experience based on their field of study. For Ladders for Leaders, we're serving young adults aged 16 to 22. So that's your older high school, so your high school seniors, and then up to the 4 years of college, so up until the age of 22. Just to talk a little bit more about Ladders and the application process. So I know everyone's familiar with SYEP, and there's a whole lottery system for SYEP. For Ladders for Leaders, it's a little bit different where our participants must meet certain criteria. Some of those include a 3.0 GPA or higher. Also, they must have previous work experience. So that can be a paid opportunity or a volunteer opportunity as well. And they're also submitting an essay that speaks to their interests, where they see themselves, what their career goals are. So the application process is a little bit different. Anyone applying to ladders would apply to SYEP as well. While they're completing the SYEP application, if they meet any of the criteria for ladders, they would be directed to the ladders application in the system. So they would be applying to both, and then we see how things shake out in regards to their participation in ladders or their participation in SYEP. Just going on to the next slide, talking a little bit more about our participants. These students are coming from your top schools and universities, all the CUNYs, SUNYs, NYUs, Columbias, things of that nature. Some of your top CTE schools, and just general high school pool of students as well. Again, they're coming in trained, so they have experience within the workplace. But through Ladders for Leaders, they're also obtaining 30 hours of pre-employment training, which is a little bit different from SYEP. So that 30 hours of training is mandatory for Ladders participants before they interview with any employer that we're referring them to. They're also very skilled. I'm sure you all know young folks when it comes to social media, when it comes to technology. We're seeing that a lot of our participants coming into Ladders are skilled in those areas, and also just very diverse. So we have a diverse group of students, whether that's racially, culturally, but also just diverse in their skills and also backgrounds, so their field of study. Just to highlight some of our successes, we served over 1,000 participants through the Ladders program last year, and we're aiming to go higher this year. I'm sure you all know for SYEP, that number was at 54,000, so much greater there, but hoping to increase those numbers as well. Within our tech sector, we tripled our placements there. So we had a lot of new tech startups, but also some larger tech companies that came on board this time around. We had about 2,700 applicants, so we were able to serve over that 1,000. And you can see on the right-hand side, there were 191 different sites. We worked across 60 different industries, and we work with community-based partners. So this year we have 6 partners, and they're located throughout all the 5 boroughs. And for Brooklyn, we're working with JCC of Greater Coney Island. I'm hoping that those are familiar with that organization. They're really leading a lot of our Brooklyn engagements when it comes to the Ladders program. Just some more stats here, just in regards to breakdown. You'll see that we're serving, I guess, an equal mix of high school and college students for the Ladders program. Also, just taking a look at gender, there's 66% female, 34% male. Just some additional highlights here. I mentioned tech and being able to increase those placements there. And we've also been able to work within these different sectors as well, with finance, nonprofits, and governments as well for the Ladders program. Just some more survey results, just to add in, 98% would like to participate in the program again. So we're seeing a value, we're seeing a lot of young people coming back in, and a lot of employers rehiring the participants coming back. They might have interned there as a senior in high school, now they're interning again as a freshman in college, so we're seeing a lot of that. Just some employer testimonials. AOL was a great partnership that we had this year, placing, I believe it was close to 20 different participants with AOL, but there were a lot of different companies and the range of companies that we've been able to place students in. And yeah, I think we've covered a lot of things. Just in regards to how you all can assist, I do believe some materials just went around. So right now it's really about getting the word out to the young folks in your communities and in your districts to let them know that the application is up. It is on the DYCD site, so it's dyc.nyc.gov/DYCD. There we go. Sorry, didn't get that down pat. But it's in your materials. So please feel free to share that information to your young folks. Have them go on and apply. I never want to share the deadline for the application because we'll have our young folks applying, the night before the deadline. But the deadline So if you want to reach out and share that information, we can go ahead and engage that employer to become a work site for ladders or SYEP. But that's all I have for you today. Happy to answer any questions.
Any questions? All right, Rob?
Three very nuts and bolts questions. What's the rate of pay?
So for ladders for leaders, it's dependent on the employer. So it's all based on employer discretion. We have some employers that are paying $15 an hour because it's an engineering-based internship opportunity. Or we have a tech opportunity that might be paying $12 an hour. At minimum, we ask that every employer pay the minimum wage, which is the $9 per hour. But it's based on employer discretion on how much they can pay, and we've seen a range between 9 and 15 typically.
Is there a total number of hours for the summer, and are there specific start and completion dates?
Yeah, so for the start and end dates, typically the internships would start early July, so right after the July 4th holiday, and run up until mid-August. But sometimes we have employers that may be looking for college students in particular, and they want a college student to start in June. That makes sense for that academic career, so we're very flexible and work with that employer to figure out what timing works best for them. And in regards to hours, we typically ask that at minimum, the internship be 6 weeks long with 25 hours a week of work. But there's some flexibility there because some of the employers we're working with, they're looking for full-time interns to work. So all to say there's a lot of flexibility there, and it's very much dependent on the employer what they're looking for.
Thank you.
Any additional questions?
You did make mention that it's under the SYAP umbrella. I know when an individual or an applicant applies, they have to meet a certain income eligibility. Does the same hold true for this program?
No. SYP, no, there's no income eligibility requirement for SYP. It's a lottery-based system.
Yeah. So when they go on and apply through SYEP, if they meet the criteria again for ladders, they'll be directed to go.
And the criteria, we're talking about the age range, previous work experience.
Yeah, the GPA.
And the GPA.
Yeah.
All right, great. Thank you very much. So moving on to our next and final agenda item, getting set up, though not as short probably, is our
This is in keeping with our new
model
Buildings
to
Commissioner
have
Chandler.
meetings with just DMs and agency commissioners to kind of address some outstanding issues and a chance to, to bring up any concerns and try to flesh them out as best we can here using the Borough Service Cabinet as the avenue for that. So thank you very much, Commissioner Chandler and the Department of Buildings for being here with us today. The Borough President is going to try to stop in a little bit. He was scheduled to be here this morning, but he got pulled away to something late last night, so he's going to try to be here as well. But thank you for taking the time out of your schedule to be here, and we really appreciate it.
Everybody hear me?
Yes.
You have to speak right into the mic.
Right into it. Okay, I guess we're getting closer. Is it not turned on? Here, Patrick. Good morning, everyone. Just a couple of points I wanted to raise, and then we'll get into the questions if you'd like. Local Law 10 was recently passed, which is a new law that requires the department to notify community boards, council members of all new building and alteration type 1s that have been received, approved, or examined. We're also going to add demolition applications to that notification, and we're working on that as we speak, and then that should be up and running in May. So hopefully you'll be getting that information regularly. And the goal is to make it as convenient as possible so that you'll have to do as few clicks as possible, but the point again is quick transmission of information so you'll see what is coming into our system and then maybe see some of the milestones that are happening with applications. Recently, the mayor and I had a press conference to try to address our safety concerns that's going on around the city about construction. So just to remind you of some of the things that we are doing right now, among many in the last year, our latest effort is to do inspection sweeps in the 5 boroughs of about 1,500 construction sites. More than 70% of those will be at new buildings that are under 10 stories because, I'm sorry, no, about 1,000 of those sites will be at new buildings that are under 10 stories because our data shows that the majority of accidents, over 70%, occur in buildings of that size. And then the remainder of the 1,500 are in buildings that are 15 stories or higher, which have site safety managers, but we want to make sure that we're sweeping them for safety violations as well, and we're well underway into that 90-day period. I think, I don't have the hard data for you, but I know that we are several hundred inspections into that 1,500. We are quadrupling our penalties for failure to safeguard from up to a maximum of $10,000 per violation. If you repeat that violation and it becomes aggravated, then it can go as high as $25,000. So the point is to send a very strong message. We know that we are not able to get to every job site in the over 1 million buildings that are in the city, but the point is that we want to address the culture of people thinking that it's acceptable to do business and just pay the fines that come along with it. So we are vigilant about trying to get out and just set the tone that we're not going to tolerate it and that it is going to cost you, and it's going to mean more than just some fines. So the other thing that just lastly, and I'll take on some questions, is that we continue to make our push for hiring. We've done well over 100 people hired agency-wide, but our goal for this fiscal year is over 100 inspectors in addition to engineers and architects and some administrative help that we're looking for as well. But this fiscal year, we are pushing for 100 inspectors. And then the next fiscal year, we have another number that we're pushing for as well. So we are hiring. And the point, again, is to add as much capacity as possible so that we can intelligently assign those resources to places where we think they'll make the most impact. So our effort to be more proactive in our enforcement is combined with the fact that we are trying to be more intelligent with how we assign those people. So we are creating an analytics and research group to focus on places where we think have the highest likelihood of people who are violating our codes or who are being unsafe in the way they conduct their business. So we are refining our ways that we assign people, and we're giving our inspectors more tools, and we think that we're going to do a better job of making an impact. Lastly, we're expanding our legal team, and we are continually looking for ways to, again, change the culture that if you're going to do something that threatens the safety of the job site or New Yorkers in general, then there is going to be a consequence, so that we are looking to suspend licenses, revoke licenses, and that goes along with contractors. It goes along with any one of the 27 different types of licensees that we that we issue at the department, including plumbers, site safety managers, construction superintendents, electricians, etc. We are being more proactive in issuing those folks violations, as well as suspending their licenses, or in some cases absolutely revoking them. With that, I'm happy to take some questions.
Thank you. I think, Sean, you're going to lead us here?
Sure. Good morning, Commissioner.
morning.
Sean Campbell from District 14, Flatbush Midwood. We put together an agenda that I think you had a chance to preview, and I just background on the development of that agenda. It comes from some of our budget consultation questions that were still not quite tied up, from questions that have been brought before this board, and consultation with my colleagues, and a lot of input from everybody at this table and beyond. And you did address the first question about the legislation, and everything you've said is all good news, and I think is responsive to concerns that we've brought to the attention of Department of Buildings, and needs that we've expressed as well. So looking forward to the additional resources and their smart deployment.
Great. Yeah, I hope you've noticed that we've changed our website as well. We think it's a little more user-friendly. We've always, everything that we'll be sending you has always been available. It's just now it's going to be sent to you more proactively, and it should be easier for you to find. So I'm glad you think that that's a good point.
Good deal. And I'm sure that you'll be hearing from us as we use it in terms of how easy it is to use it and whether or not we're hoping to get additional information on it.
The goal is so that you don't have to call us, and I'm sure we're going to be very successful. I know that I'm looking already to assign those guys to different things because I'm sure they're not going to have anything to do.
But when we do call, they're always very helpful
I know they
to
are.
the
They're
extent
great.
that the information is available. So I think even internally, it's been a little bit of a struggle.
You're right. You're right.
Sometimes.
You're right.
So one of the issues that we've talked about more than once is complaint codes and response times. And the MMR and testimony has led us to believe that response times are improving across A, B, and C complaints. But we did ask whether B and C complaints could be ratcheted up when they're entered into the system more than once, which leads, I'm going to kind of ask this in a paragraph form and then you can go at it, but it leads to another concern that we've expressed multiple times, which is this word resolved. When there hasn't been access to a complaint, whether it's a residential or a construction site, 2 tries, no access, called resolved. Resolved suggests that it's been addressed rather than just not looked into. So we were hoping another word like no access, when there's no access, could be prescribed to that complaint so that we know where it's at. And when that does happen and we have to re-enter the complaint, can it get a different classification so you're not starting all over again every time you have to enter the complaint?
I think that's a good point. The term resolved is somewhat misleading. You're right. And so we have discussed it, and I think there might be a better way to classify the fact that we did not get in. I wouldn't say that we didn't attempt to look into it, so there's got to be a right word that says we absolutely devoted resources to it. The other thing is, we get many thousands of complaints each month, and it is just a matter of resources in terms of how we assign our resources, and it's part of the reason that they get letter grade or letter priorities is to how we target, how we assign our resources to respond to those complaints. So there has to be a method. I don't like it any more than you do, but if we've made a couple of attempts and we don't have the appropriate indicia to seek an access warrant, then we have to move on to the many other thousands of complaints to an attempt to try to be successful with those complaints. That doesn't mean that you can't re-enter the complaint again, and we do see that, so that we'll try to then gain access again. I think that data would probably show, and I don't think I have any data results that I've looked at recently, but my experience tells me that if we weren't successful in the first 2 attempts this week or month, if you enter it again, it's going to be probably a high likelihood that we won't get access next time either, unless we get an access warrant. So I would ask all of you here to, if you can, work with the folks in your communities to try to help us with affidavits to help us respond to access issues. That's number one. That's always been an issue since I worked in Brooklyn, in our Brooklyn office, 20 years ago. It was the same. It's been the same issue in every borough that I've worked in. And I realize the fact that a lot of people don't want to fill out affidavits for a variety of reasons. But we do pursue access warrants where possible, and when we get in, we issue violations. And by the way, when we do get in, we don't issue violations all the time. It's not a slam dunk. I would say around half the time or less we issue violations. It's not always a valid issue. The other thing about restarting all over again, I'm not sure that I agree that we're really restarting, because our folks do look at the fact that there's a history here. They'll see that there were previous complaints. And so I wouldn't say that it's starting all over again. And the other thing that we have some concern about is just entering in violation or complaint after complaint after complaint. I refer to it as our elevator button approach. That I'm like everybody else here. If I hit the button fast about 50 times, I know the elevator's going to come faster, right? So I know that we have that issue about complaints. So I always try to discourage folks from calling it in again if they don't like the fact that they didn't like the answer, or if you think we're going to get out there faster. I wouldn't say that typically is the case, but what I would ask for you to do is to prioritize among yourselves and then call our folks in the borough office, and they'll try to steer our resources in the way that best meets your needs so that we can try to work together. I know that that's not the greatest answer, but that's the best one that I've got for you right now. In terms of, I'm sure that's not as satisfactory as you'd like it to be.
Does anybody want to chime in or share an experience or an example?
Sure, sure.
Good morning, Commissioner.
Good morning.
Henry Butler, District Manager, Board 3. So you make the call, 2 attempts, they can't get in, resolved. It sounds like as if you're saying, don't make a call again on that same particular issue? Because you guys said when they go in twice and they get put resolved, then they move on to the next one. So what happens to this particular complaint when the constituent is still calling our offices complaining about whatever they're complaining about? What am I telling them? To call 301 again? Or is it somewhere in y'all system where after a certain time the inspectors know to go back to that particular house?
Generally, they're not going to go back if they've made 2 attempts and they weren't able to get in. But if the constituents continue to call you, and I understand that they frequently will, ask them a couple of things. If there's a better time for us to make that visit, that we might be a little bit more successful. Because many times our inability to gain access is related to the time of the day. And there are people that just won't open the door, but sometimes it's just a bad time of the day. So we'll be happy to try to work with you. So I would say, yeah, put the complaint back in if you think that it's valid, and ask them if there's a better time of day that they would suggest, or ask them if they would consider doing an affidavit, or if they think that there's indicia that we haven't seen that might give us some backing to make a request to a judge for an access warrant. We are bound, like everyone else, to get access warrants. We have to be convincing in front of a judge to say, this is why we think you should give us that access.
Okay,
So
they
try
definitely,
that.
they definitely, in order to keep that complaint in the system,
You have to
they
try to
definitely have to make another call.
Yes.
Like
yes.
your
And
DOB inspectors are not going to go automatically go back to it.
no, we're going to try to do any of the number of several thousand complaints we got that month for the borough of Brooklyn.
Okay.
So try that.
I think there could be some improvements in matching the complainant to the inspections. We have had cases where the resident bringing the issue forward offers to open their home so it can be observed or to meet the inspector there, and then it falls through and doesn't happen. So in those cases, we've called for assistance and it does get straightened out, but if you're trying to get us to not call, there's room for improvement there. The other, to follow up, and Marnie, I think you brought this to my attention, so make sure I'm asking the question right, but are there ever administrative complaint, are there administrative closures? If a complaint's been just in the system too long and no access gained and it's not observed, you just close it out entirely? Did I get it right, Marnie?
We talked about this.
So, excuse me. Good morning. My name is Patrick Whaley. I'm the Assistant Commissioner for External Affairs at the Buildings Department. We do have administrative closures that we use at the department. That would be a situation where we've received multiple complaints for the same incident. We've performed our inspection, it's been resolved in one way or another, and we'll administratively close out those other complaints that are identical to the one that we actually inspected. That would be the typical example of an administrative closure.
District Manager, Community Board 11. What we're finding is that people are that we're finding administrative closures, however, the complaint isn't exactly the same. So everything is closed out and there's never an inspection. Maybe that can be reviewed, and I'd be happy to show you examples of those and send them over to you.
I would be happy to see those examples.
Absolutely, we'll get that over. I'll get it to you, Andrew, and maybe you'll forward that.
And this is where we would want you to call. So, yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
absolutely.
These are things we can do together and be productive with your phone calls.
Absolutely. Thank
Can
you.
I ask a follow-up, Sean? I'm a little unclear as to who is executing the affidavit and what they are swearing to.
You want to talk about that?
So as part of that process, the complainant would work with our legal staff in the borough, and they would work to, with their help, build an application for a judge. And the complainant's part of that process is to share with our legal staff in the borough office the indicia that they see that could help build a case for the judge. be it multiple mailboxes, multiple doorbells, cable lines, utility lines. In sharing that information, that affidavit will be part of the package that's presented to the judge in an effort to seek a warrant to get access to the property.
And so conceivably, the affidavit could be executed by the district manager?
Absolutely.
Okay, thanks.
Could we get the data that you referred to, the data on repeat inspections and how many times access is gained after X number of attempts?
We'll provide that for you, for sure.
Okay, thank you. And then we'll work on reaching out in the community to see if we can generate affidavits or doing them ourselves. But we also, we kind of touched on this, but duplicative complaints that, and I think, Joe, you brought this up, there's complaints that they're registered as duplications even when they're not. So the example we had was when a curb cut, which requires an alt-3 permit, leads to a parking pad that is in the streetscape text amendment. There are actually two different enforcements, and so for them to be logged in as the same complaint might not be suitable, and it might not be as effective.
Well, that's possible, but the inspector is trained to see if there is, one goes with the other, so they should write a violation if it's warranted. You're right, if there's a pad there but no car, they're not going to be able to write the violation for illegal parking.
See, we're experts at kind of trying to log the information through 311, but the average citizen, if they call 311 to report an illegal curb cut and accessory parking pad, the complaint will go in as an illegal curb cut. Oftentimes, sometimes there is a permit for a curb cut that's not zoning compliant. And, we have found several mistakes where that has happened. But I think sometimes that it's difficult online to report a zoning complaint, especially as it relates to front yard parking. There's no prompt for that. There used to be a zoning complaint where you could access that online. And 311 operators generally will now no longer accept zoning complaints. So those complaints are listed as curb cut violations only.
Okay. I'm unaware that 311 is not taking zoning complaints. That's true? I'm unaware. David, are you?
Yeah, no, she's definitely right, but there are certain things, certain types of categories that may need to be tweaked, not by us, specifically by 311. So perhaps, I think Lisa Lewis is our liaison, I believe, 311. We could speak to her about certain categories that they need to tweak. I know I used to be the liaison with 301 a while back, and they do have a list of keywords that that when you call up, they try to figure out the correct category. So that may be something that we need to tweak, and particularly, like you said, like the streetscape text amendment, you may need to have a specific category for that. And when someone utters those words, that comes up to the 301 operator, and then they can assign, the correct complaint. So it's just a matter of sort of maybe an introduce the conversation to just tweak that to what we need.
You should follow up with Lisa on that. I was unaware that that's been removed from the system. Again, I'm not sure that the inspector's going to be able to write a violation if there's not a car there, which is, I know, seems a little silly, but it's true.
Tangent, Lisa Lewis is a DOB. She works for DOB and she is liaison to 311? She's with your agency, right? So does every agency have a 311 liaison?
Yes.
Did we all know this?
I didn't know that.
This is interesting, right?
I think you should have the 311 person sitting here.
We actually did, and it never came up, so that's a good follow-up.
I don't think we're wrong. Everyone has a liaison. At least when I've talked to them, they've said that they do. I guess, I hope I don't get a call.
Well, all right, we'll get back to building specific now. The next question was on building permits, and on the one hand, it's important that complaints be investigated in a timely manner to ensure safety and compliance with zoning and building code, but on the other hand, it's difficult to cut through red tape, and we've got a lot of programs in the city that are up and running now through Chambers of Commerce and the Comptroller's Office, to name just a couple, that are assisting businesses and developers with cutting through the red tape. So is the number of programs available to NYC to help cut through the red tape indicative of a need to reduce it?
I'm not sure what you're referring to.
Well, when people are dealing with the Department of Buildings, they often hire expediters. So it just suggests that the department has so many hurdles to jump over that it's difficult. I just worked with somebody trying to move into a new home that had 40 outstanding, how many inspections needed to take place before the C of O could be granted. And it just seemed like a lot. Is there a way to streamline the process so that C of Os can be generated in a more expeditious way?
There's always, I think, from now until the end of time, there will always be a challenge to how we could make it faster. But at the same time, I think everyone here in this room acknowledges that if we do it too quickly and we miss something, you're going to be the first one to make the call to say, how did you miss that?
Right. No, it's a balancing act.
Right. And every elected official, as soon as something goes to something that they're not pleased with, they write a law. And I can't change that. And so I can say that all the regulations that we're enforcing, we didn't write. They were handed to us after they were passed by an elected official. And whether, oftentimes we'll be in support of it, many times we'll have other opinions about it. And yes, there are occasions where we will draft something because we think it's necessary, but we are challenged with the dual imperative, as I say frequently, is enhancing development in the city, but also enforcing a safe construction site. So enhancing development is a very, very involved thing, and the zoning resolution is an extremely complicated document that we don't have a word to say about it. It's handed to us at the end of the process, and we have to interpret and enforce it, and it's extremely complicated. And then we have 3 different building codes, and a multiple dwelling law and a loft law, and there's a reason why we have all the things that you have to meet in order to get a certificate of occupancy, because it relates to many things that have caused people concern over the years. And so we are constantly evaluating how we could do that in a more streamlined way. And I'll end the answer to that question by saying what we're doing right now is we're trying to put every type of application into its own bucket, and then we're trying to narrow down the matters that we are most concerned about from a risk perspective, risk being risk from a safety perspective, or risk being from what's the consequence if you get this wrong in terms of a bank mortgage or something being overbuilt. So we're trying to concentrate the things that we look at into the highest risk to the lowest risk, and so that we know where we should spend our time. That's the goal, so that we can publish those things, and so that people will know what it is that we're looking for, so that it's not a mystery, and that our goal is to be as transparent and consistent as possible. That's been a challenge since I started working at this place 27 years ago, and it's always been a challenge. But we absolutely are continually trying to figure that out. This was my first direction from the mayor when I took the job, is you got to figure this out, because this is really difficult for small business owners and small homeowners, and you got to do better, and that's what we're trying to do.
And yet we've had experiences, and which leads to the next question, which is why are permits being granted on sites that have outstanding violations, and what's the penalty for working after a stop work order has been issued?
Well, two very distinct questions. After a stop work order has been issued, if you're violating that stop work order, we call that an aggravated violation, and the fines go up significantly. Very significantly. And again, as I mentioned in my earlier remarks, is that we're trying to send the message that it's just not acceptable for you to conduct your business as though fines are acceptable. So that's why we've quadrupled them in some cases. The first part of your question?
Work permits being...
Patrick will answer.
So I think intuitively, it makes sense that if someone has violations, they shouldn't be receiving permits. However, at the department, we have a very grave concern about doing that. If an individual and owner has violations and we choose to withhold their permit, they may go ahead and pay those violations so they can get the permit. However, they can go ahead and not pay the violations, do the work, and not get the permit. And that work would not be subject to the department's regulation and scrutiny. and that has the very real possibility in driving that work underground without the benefit of our scrutiny, the work could be performed unsafely. It puts the public safety at risk. So as a department, we are not supportive of the idea of withholding permits for outstanding violations because of the potential it can cause harm to the public. When we do issue those stop work orders, our first penalty is $5,000, and in an aggravated penalty, it can go as high as $25,000.
And the folks that are doing the work underground, I think we all know, they're intent on doing it underground, and they're just not doing things the right way, and they're trying to get away with breaking the law. And I think that you would agree that most of the time you don't want those folks being encouraged. So we think that will encourage those. We think a lot of this will drive work towards them.
Do you have a reaction? Anybody? Yeah, Eddie.
Hi, good morning. My name is Eddie Mark, and I'm the district manager of Community Board 13 down in Coney Island. We have a situation where we have a death wellness center that has been opened up in a C7 zone, which is amusement. And this was before I came in, and they continued building, and they opened, and now we can't get rid of them. How do we address this? We can give them violations, I understand, but they pay it, then what do we do then?
David?
Yeah,
David.
The situation that he knows. This actually was brought up by a previous district manager, and at the time, there was, I guess it was out there, let's put it that way, that they were possibly bringing a center like this in there. However, they hadn't occupied at the time. They did have valid permits for the work that they were doing. And we had said until they actually violate the occupancy, there wasn't really anything we could do as long as the permits were valid for the work they were performing. And sure enough, they did move in there. We did violate them right away.
So it's an illegal use?
What's that?
It's an illegal use contrary to zoning?
Illegal use, right. They do have violations for that. Apparently, they're continuing to use. We're certainly, continuing with any, enforcement measures that we can take. But, there was nothing that we could do, obviously, before someone does something, we can't issue a violation for it. So, and as soon as they did, we did violate them right away. So, we'll just continue our enforcement efforts as best we can and hopefully resolve it.
And I would seek to see if there's any kind of a multiple agency effort that could be done, if you can get finance, and I don't know if police have any matters here, but or special enforcement. I mean, try to see if there are opportunities from a multiple agency perspective. I'm unfamiliar with the details, I'm sorry.
If I can ask a question about that point, when you have a violation, like in this case for illegal use, is it a one violation just for the illegal use itself, or is it every single successive day? Where if you illegal use for 7 days, that's $35,000. It's $5,000 a day for that penalty. I mean, how do you use that that fine as an actual disincentive to continue the use? Because if you're just getting fined $5,000 whenever you get inspected, which may be once a month, maybe once every 2 months, maybe whatever, that's not really a disincentive. Whereas if you're getting a fine every single day of illegal activity,
There is definitely progression of fines, and as Commissioner can tell you also, there's aggravated, maybe better also in terms of the illegal conversions. Are there maybe daily penalties
Yes.
associated with that?
So in addition to aggravated penalties, which can go as high as $25,000, there are daily $1,000 penalties as well.
For certain violations.
And with some illegal conversion violations, we are seeking now to lien properties with violations. We can't do that for most of the other violations that we do. So we started last fall to write violations on illegal conversions that, if left uncorrected, we can start placing the violations in a lienable format with Department of Finance. So that's a new tool that we've been adding to our arsenal. Some of those liens would start showing up in the new fiscal year in July. Again, if they're uncorrected and if there are violations, penalties that are still outstanding. I don't think that sounds like it's an option for the case that you're talking about.
So the case they're talking about, essentially, Coney Island's an amusement district, and this happens to be, it's not a bad thing, it's a place for, it's sort of like a daycare for people who are hearing impaired. It's just a matter of where they chose to set up is an amusement district, and then now it's supposed to be operating over there. That's the whole thing. If they went somewhere else, it would be fine. This is where they are, is the issue.
Joseph, I just want to follow up to what Andrew was saying, and I think that's better. I just want to understand it a little bit, and following up on what Eddie said. So we have two recurring problems in our district with recurring operating contrary to zoning, operating contrary to certificate of occupancy. And DOB does a great job violating those properties. Mostly we have these massage parlors and day spas that have popped up. And they require a special permit by the Board of Standards and Appeals for a physical culture establishment. And then we also have some manufacturing uses we've had in the past operating in C1 districts, primarily retail uses. And what we have found is once DOB violates, it can take as much as 7 months before those ECB violations are adjudicated. And it's my understanding if another 311 complaint is filed in that interim, that's closed out until the ECB
is adjudicated.
Yeah. And I mean, it could take, when I say 7 months, I've seen sometimes a year. So it's very frustrating that an illegal use can continue in that time period, kind of, which feels like free of violation, and it's operating contrary to use. So is there a way that you envision that that can be worked on, corrected? It's very frustrating for us in the district offices.
I'm familiar with that issue. It depends on this particular issue. We are bound by the Constitution just like anybody else, so we have to follow due process. And the legal representation for the people that we violated have shown up in court and are asking for delays or deferments or convincing the judge that there needs to be more time to present evidence or defense. It's just like you see in any other court. We have a fairly high standard from our perspective, and that's why I think in most cases they're able to stretch it out. If it's the spas that you mentioned, then I would strongly encourage you to engage with PD or the Office of Special Enforcement, which we have staff on the Office of Special Enforcement out of the Mayor's office that focus on those matters as well. So we can show up with PD, fire, and health department and try to, and I'm sure you know this already, so we certainly prepared for these questions at the recent town hall in your district, so we were aware of it. This is going on in certain areas in Queens as well, and the spas need to see a forceful response from us, and we're absolutely willing to participate. We think it's more forceful if we show up with PD and health at the same time, if they have an illegal adult establishment. It's complicated, I realize.
So I just want to add on to what Josephine said. Number one, I want to thank the Brooklyn Borough Office. They've helped us tremendously in tackling this issue, and almost every complaint that we've put in has seen a violation. However, and multiple violations, because at many of these places it's illegal partitions, illegal saunas, and plumbing and electrical work and what have you. But one of the things that I noticed is that the illegal work has up to $2,600 fines attached to it, and I understand that for the safety aspect. However, on the illegal use, it's only $600. And that's really, in my opinion, the price of doing business. These places probably generate thousands upon thousands of dollars. Have you considered raising those fines so it's an aggravated?
Yeah, we should take a look at that. These are scheduled fines?
Yes, I
So,
understand
yeah,
that.
when I talked to you earlier about the laws being handed to us, I mean, this would be one where we could actually maybe develop something and ask for it to be submitted, and we will look into that.
Yeah, I really believe that would be a disincentive.
Without question, that's just a cost of doing business, and that seems so light to me.
Exactly.
So
Thank you.
we will look into that.
Good, thank you. Anyone else here? You mentioned certificates of occupancy, and we're seeing an increase, at least anecdotally, in the use of backyard space for commercial use. Often this comes to our attention when there's an SLA application. The applicant will often, if there's not a C of O, either for the property or even for the backyard, request a letter of no objection from the Department of Buildings. I think while DOB might not have an objection, the community often does. And there's no notification to the community boards when that letter is being offered. And I think in most cases we would prefer to have it not offered, or at least the understanding of why it's being provided. Can we talk about that a little bit?
Well, so I would encourage you to reach out to our folks, and they'll give you an explanation. You know, we are in the business of as-of-right uses, so we are not, we're not the City Planning Commission, and we're not the Board of Standards and Appeals, and we don't listen to appeals for variances. That said, nothing is written so clear cut that it's always a slam dunk as to how something needs to be applied. But so that's what we try to do, is interpret how something is written, and if we think that it's as of right, then we go ahead and grant it. So that's why we don't have a system where we have hearings, because we do as of right work. And so if we think that it's as of right, then we grant it. If we don't, then we don't. And anybody has the right to appeal. Any of our decisions are always appealable to the Board of Standards and Appeals. So that's an indirect way of saying that we can't reach out to and ask people to weigh in whether they like it or not, because we're making an interpretation based on what's in front of us. If we think it's as of right, then we'll grant it. Again, it's part of what I said earlier about following the Constitution. I mean, the moment that we don't grant something that appears as of right, then we are accused of being arbitrary and not following the property rights of someone who's allowed to use their property the way the law says that they can use it. I realize with the SLA that that can be aggravating sometimes.
I just want to follow up, because we have as a board that has 200 licensed establishments, this question comes up a lot, and it still remains very confusing to us at Community Board 10. So if a restaurant that has never before operated a rear yard applies to the State Liquor Authority, and this property has no certificate of occupancy, and then moves to use the rear yard space, which is a use that has never been used before. We have questioned that because they are expanding, or they're changing, we feel, their previous occupancy. And that should be examined both in terms of what their restaurant occupancy is, as well as what additional seating could be made available to the rear yard. And State Liquor Authority often refers us to buildings, and with the letter of no objection, we feel we're in a catch-22. So are you saying that if we disagree with that letter of no objection, we can file a reconsideration with your agency? Or
You can file it with the Board of Standards and Appeals. Which, I'll be honest, I've never seen done. I hear what you're saying, that I have some concern that we're issuing letters of no objection to places that don't have certificates of occupancy and are expanding, that because there's an issue related to egress and the number of occupants that would require to have 2 means of egress, which would be something that we would require to have on an application. So if we're issuing letters of no objection to places like that, we'll need to revisit about how we're doing some of our business. But I think in the lion's share of those cases, they're already established uses, and they can show that they're established, as there are many thousands of buildings in the city that don't have certificates of occupancy that are occupied legally. And so we make an interpretation as to whether we're going to require that you get a certificate of occupancy, or are we going to be satisfied that you have established your legal use, and we're not going to put you through what was just brought up a few minutes ago, all of the hurdles to get a certificate of occupancy, because we're trying to be helpful to small businesses. See, that's what I mean about the dual imperative here. So we're trying to be helpful to small businesses and not be onerous on them if they can demonstrate that they've been doing this for a long time. Now, should we require them to go through all of those hurdles because they want to expand into their rear yard? And I think sometimes, yes, maybe, but I'm going to guess that more often than not, we say your use has been established as long as you're not creating an unsafe condition regarding your egress, and you're not putting any patrons at risk. We think that we have no objection to you occupying the rear yard.
And I would agree with what you've just said, but I think there could be a way that in government we can do both. I think there could be a way to streamline certificate of occupancy processes for small businesses while protecting consumer protections. I think that the process is onerous, and I think there may be ways to streamline that in certain categories, and I would hope that could be looked at, because we grapple with this in terms of community complaints, especially rear yard use that can go on till 4 a.m., and noise and quality of life problems is something that take up a lot of our concerns in our communities. Thank you. Rob?
What I seem to be hearing is a need for a zoning text amendment.
Yeah.
That, it seems to me that backyard use isn't really considered very closely in the zoning resolution. And so, and I also think that in the last decade or so, we've had a proliferation of establishments, not just bars, but restaurants as well, that serve alcohol. There was a number knocked around about how many licenses. Josephine says she had 200 licensed establishments in her district, and Jerry joked that he had 200 licensed establishments on one block, which is a modest exaggeration on his part, but not a tremendous one. So what I seem to be hearing, and perhaps the commissioner can share his perspective, is that we need to have the Department of City Planning look at backyard use separately from commercial use in general.
I would encourage you to discuss that with city planning, and wish you all the best.
I appreciate your good wishes.
Anybody else here? Michelle, you have anything here?
It's a little strange that, you mentioned the pre-existing businesses, but there are a lot of new businesses that come to us for rear yard extensions, and they also get the letter of no objection. And we know firsthand they don't have the second way of egress, and they're granted these letters of no objection.
So you cited about 3 things there that really are getting into the weeds in terms of the code and the zoning. Extension is a defined term, and also it's about whether you have 75 people or more typically, where you would need a second means of egress, whether you're creating a place of assembly or if the existing use was commercial but not necessarily the restaurant. I mean, all of these things go into Ira's thinking when he's evaluating, or one of his staff, and with the help of his 2 aides that know this stuff very inside and out. So it's not straightforward, and that's why I love our colleagues at City Planning, but it's a challenge for them to know the challenge that we face in trying to interpret what they write, and then ask us for our input, and it's a balancing act, and I don't think, again, I'm not giving you a satisfactory answer. I know that, but that's a complicated. It's a complicated
So
issue.
75 or more, they need.
A second means, typically. Second means of egress.
Go ahead, Henry.
Oftentimes,
So
these
let's-
small spaces don't have the 70. They go up to 74. Very deliberately, we'll say we have 74 people here. And that's by design.
And that's only in that outside area, or that's
No,
the
it's for
entire?
the whole space. If I only have one means at the front, which is typically how it works, then that's, and if I can get the travel distance, which is typically the 100 feet from the rear lot line to the front. This is a very typical layout. Ira, I'm not, you're not, that's right, agreed? Okay, so we're about right on that.
Henry?
No.
Or we can try to do a joint effort. I would encourage that too. Listen, we know that the NYPD carries juice that we don't have. So we're happy if you can convince them to do joint inspection with us so that we can do any enforcement related to the building
We
code
need
and
margin
zoning
questions.
while they're there. Listen, it is, we all know what reality is. That will help. In your particular case, please talk to Ira and see if we can figure out if there's something different we should be doing on any of the specifics that you have there.
As my grandmother liked to say, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure.
Yes.
Right.
Oh,
And
great.
so we'll gladly participate in a joint effort with PD, fire, or other, or Mayor's Office of Special Enforcement. Christian Klausner is a great partner at the Mayor's Office, where he brings a lot to bear from the legal perspective and multi-agency enforcement perspective. So we gladly work with their office as well.
Thank you. Anything else here? Scaffolding is our next topic. Should I ask a question, or do you just want to talk about scaffolding?
No, ask a question.
It can remain up for years at a time,
Oh.
both for construction and dilapidated sites. Can a renewal process be reviewed? At some point, can an emergency declaration be issued to either demolish or secure the site so the scaffolding can be removed?
You want to try it? I'm happy to. So Scaffolding, we would use the term sidewalk shed because scaffolding is indeed a different structure. Scaffolding is
Sure.
typically the structure that sits on top of the shed, and we have a dedicated inspection unit for those, particularly when they are dangerous and people fall and hurt themselves or others. Sidewalk sheds are the ones that prevent debris from falling off the building onto the sidewalk, and I don't like them any more than you do. But we did do a sweep in January, where we did over 300 miles of inspections, I think, on all 5 boroughs to make sure that the sheds were in appropriately maintained condition with appropriate lighting and that all the materials were attached, et cetera. They're not pleasant to be around for years. My office building is probably where I work every day is I think into its 7th or 8th year, and it's owned by the city. And it's frustrating because we know that work is being done in some places, and then whatever dispute they're happening or that they're reassigning the workers, the facade work isn't being done. So sometimes work gets started on the facade and then stops, or sometimes the owner doesn't get it financed. I'm not telling you anything you haven't heard already 100 times. But what I do know is that without sheds, there can be very tragic consequences, and it's a very, very sad thing. It's a very sad thing. And we have got to try to motivate owners to do the right thing and fix their facades. And it's, that's for local law 11, which is for buildings that are greater than 6 stories. The many buildings under that height limit have facade issues as well, and there's no law that requires them to inspect and submit reports like we do for the other ones that are over 6 stories, which is 14,500 buildings in the city. It's a challenge that I welcome ideas to try to provide the appropriate incentive for owners to make those repairs.
Perhaps it being more expensive to renew than to originally file for a sidewalk shed.
It's certainly an idea. I mean, the one thing I'll throw out there is, from the buildings department's perspective, the sidewalk shed needs to stay up for as long as the unsafe condition exists on the facade. And oftentimes, these facade repairs are extraordinarily expensive. Clearly, the buildings department can't do the work, but we need to make sure for as long as that condition exists, that the sidewalk shed remains in place.
When the sidewalk shed necessitates a temporary sidewalk, does that temporary sidewalk have to be handicap accessible?
To my knowledge, yes, it does, and I've seen them, and I don't think we're not enforcing. That's the Department of Transportation, and to my knowledge, they are requiring it, and I'm seeing it. So I think the answer is yes. If they're not, then call our colleagues at DOT, or we can refer. I assume, David, you have a counterpart at DOT. We could probably alert them. I'm not sure that we can write that violation.
Yeah, but we definitely refer.
Okay.
Okay. Anything else there? Rob?
Not on that topic.
Okay. I think this next question may have come from Community Board 2. So jump in if I'm not articulating it right. For some projects within 200 feet of a residential building, the Borough Commissioner's Office instructs applicants for after-hour variances to obtain from the local community board a letter of no objection. These applications can be for work earlier or later than the permissible hours or on Sunday. Why are community boards contacted in some cases but not others? And is the community board's opinion purely advisory?
So to start with the last part, the community board's role is advisory. My understanding in Brooklyn why some community boards were contacted to provide this letter of no objection, others weren't, I think it was related to the scale of development that occurs and the requests for variances that are received are higher in some community boards than they are in others. What I can tell you is the department is sort of undergoing an evaluation of the after-hour variance process largely to sort of get a better understanding of the universe that we deal with, the conditions by which they're granted, where they are, what's the duration. So we're now in the process of conducting an evaluation of the after-hour variance process. Just like the example you're providing, there are some parts of the city that handle this process differently than others. Clearly, there should be a uniform process by which this is dealt with, and it's something the department is looking at right now.
With that said, though, we ask a lot of Ira and his team, and he is trying to balance that dual imperative. He's really trying to provide customer service for people to get their projects done, because believe me, the people who are asking for these, they scream just as loudly if we say no to as the people who don't want it. So that's a balancing act that we put on all of our borough commissioners, and they're trying to serve everybody. So it's a challenge. It's a challenge.
Hi, I'm Nadine Whitted, Community Board 4, Bushwick. Over the past 2 years, we've received calls asking us to okay Sunday work. And it didn't matter to me if it was a 3-story, 5-story, or 10-story. I take it to my board, they do not want any work on Sunday in our district whatsoever, any construction work. For that to be told to the building department, are you still going to look at what, our covenant, or what the size of the building is?
So we'll take into account we just heard it, you don't want anything on Sundays. But we also get very compelling arguments for work to be done on evenings and weekends based on material delivery, based on the type of work that's going to be going on site, if there's certain types of structural stability, if there's going to be a crane erected for the day or for multiple days. Stuff that makes sense to keep the minimal amount of pedestrian traffic around so that the impact is minimal. So those things are also taken into account. So as I said, sometimes we get very compelling arguments to allow the work to be done on weekends.
So that means then that you will make the final decision because so why are they calling us then?
I think because he's trying to do what I just said. He's trying to provide a courtesy to say that we'd like to know what your opinion is. I guess we don't have to call anymore since we know you don't want anything on Sunday. And I don't mean that disrespectfully. I guess we've heard. I'm assuming you know that, but
there's a lot of situations where you have a bank has to do a renovation. They obviously can't do it during working hours. They don't want to close their business, so they want to work on a Sunday or a Saturday or at night from 6 till 8 o'clock in the morning.
and if it's interior only work, that weighs into it, but sometimes interior only work is not really interior only. It's interior until you take out all the debris that you knocked down and you put it into an extremely noisy trash compactor. I know, believe me, we all know, and it can be horrible. We realize that.
If I may, actually, I have a situation in my community, and I contacted David just a few days ago. I've been receiving complaints regarding a site. They came before us. They sent us a letter, and we asked that they attend one of our committee meetings, which they did not. And then community residents were calling us that work was being done on Saturdays and Sundays. It's not something that we actually like to see in our communities. I've received a number of complaints. And for religious reasons too, you have some people that, their religion on Sundays and Saturdays is a rest day for them. And so this has been an issue, and I'm hearing now not only in my community, but other communities. So I would really like for this to be addressed in a different form and at least have the community board input in terms of the Saturday and Sunday variance, please. Does the buildings department take into consideration the amount of construction projects? I have one block, it's like 3 or 4 projects taking place at the same time. So the residents aren't, undergoing construction all week, and then you grant this one on Sunday. I mean, that's their only rest day because so much is going on their one block. So is that considered?
To answer your question, yes. And as a general matter, not knowing the specifics of what's going on in that block, after our variances are issued, if there's a public safety reason for doing so, meaning to do that work that's being performed on the weekend or after hours, to do that work during the week would present a greater threat to the safety of pedestrians. And so that's, as a general matter, why these variances are issued. Because on the weekends or off hours, there are fewer pedestrians who could be affected by it. Oftentimes you need to close a lane of traffic for deliveries or for crane work. That has a potential to affect the safety of the public. So the idea as a general matter is to allow this work to proceed when the safety of the public is less at risk.
You stated that the
the weekend work is going to be looked at and you're looking into the protocol and whatnot. Will Brooklyn community boards be part of that discussion?
It's generally not our policy to do that. Just as I said before, we do as of right stuff, and it's getting back to that dual imperative again. We have to help small businesses and others to get their projects moving forward. If we start asking people to attend hearings and then put some base some rule on that that's not in the city charter or in the administrative code, then I think that we might be exceeding our bounds, and we'll revisit how we're interacting with the community boards.
But if you're looking at the totality of the problem and solutions, you might want to hear our voices. It doesn't have to be a hearing, it could be a meeting.
Understood, and we're at the very beginning of a process here, but certainly as this process unfolds, certainly we'll be speaking with community boards and members of the public generally to share our ideas and thoughts.
And I just want to add and just share my experience with after-hour variances. In Community Board 10, each time the Buildings Department has asked for us to issue a letter to an applicant that wants a nighttime variance, we have taken that opportunity to meet with the company, and we bring the residents on the block because we are a heavy residential area. When we have been asked to do that, those jobs have run smoothly because the applicant typically can do noise mitigation efforts that they didn't really think about beforehand, and we kind of work out inside work versus outside work. It's those times where we're not asked. Recently, we had a school construction authority, long-term project that is ongoing more than 2 years that involved extensive outdoor work, received night variance permits till 2 a.m. Those residents that surrounded the block were just miserable. And we had to have emergency meetings with elected officials. So I think that in certain projects and long-term projects, when we work together on noise mitigation efforts, because there are noise mitigation efforts that contractors can take. There are muffling, there are noise barriers. We have the TBTA we work with all the time with the Verrazano Bridge. And if contractors can think in terms of noise mitigation, I think it would go a long way, and that cooperative effort, I think, would be helpful. So as you look at that, I ask you to consider that as well.
Absolutely.
And I just have to comment that in my experience, and I've been around a long time, it's never been the Department of Buildings who've asked me if any of these contractors can work extended hours. It's always been the developer themselves. I agree. And unfortunately, I beg to differ because these aren't little small business operations. These are multi-billion-dollar operations that's building industry.
Patrick, I appreciate the insight that you shared, and I'm glad to hear that the department is taking a look at this. A couple of discrepancies, at least to my lay generalist's eyes. One is I'm not noticing that there's uniformity even just within my community district. I get contacted by some developers, I don't get contacted from some other developers, and I only learn about the variances when constituents call me up on Monday morning and say, what the heck was going on? And I look it up, and sure enough, there was a variance, and this is the first I've heard of it. So lack of uniformity from place to place, but even within community districts. And, you know, my board prides itself on not being obstructionistic, and so I certainly understand the need for, you know, Sunday crane erection, or if you're doing a concrete pour and you need to do the whole pour, or the job just doesn't work. Those kinds of things we generally don't have a problem with, but I'm finding many variances are made for what seems to be just standard construction that the developer just wants to get done sooner so I can lease this up and start generating income instead of just having outflow of money. And so I don't find that there's consistency there either.
So we'll look into it.
Thank you.
And I should just add, you know, the concern you're raising, it's by no means the first time we've heard it. We're very much aware of it, and it's something we're looking at.
And I'm grateful for that.
Anything else from anybody else? I have no more words on my paper, so thank you very, very much for your time and for the input.
Thank you very much, Commissioner. Does anybody have any old business to discuss or any new business? No?
We'll hear from the MTA about the L train.
So I put in a request to the MTA. I'm waiting to hear back from them because they're still waiting to get some additional information once they have more details. Some of the news that came out, both about the L train and about the 30 stations that the governor announced would be rehabilitated, was, I guess, a little premature in terms of how the information was released. So when I spoke to the MTA, they didn't have all the details themselves. So we are talking and we're trying to figure out the best time to bring them here once they have something to actually discuss.
Sandy was 2012. Do you think they could at least report the extent of the damage?
I'm not disagreeing. But I do have your request, and I have reached out to them, and so as soon as we're able to lock something in, it'll be on the agenda. Our April meeting is our full Borough Service Cabinet meeting, and as part of that agenda, we're going to carry on the conversation we started in February about agency responses to district need statements and budget requests. So we will, I think, Josephine, you said you have that compilation, right, of issues?
DOT, yes.
DOT has.
Yeah.
Okay.
No, I have them. I
No,
didn't send-
you have, who has the agency response and stuff from February?
I don't remember you ever having asked us for that.
You know, when we last met, you had, Andrew, we had talked about it, but we didn't really put that together.
Nobody?
Okay.
We'll do
That's
that.
the answer.
So I will follow up with you guys then. So for April, you remember in February, OMB said that it would be, they were willing to have a conversation with the other agencies to talk about response times. They've asked us to, the Borough Service Cabinet, the Borough President Office, to take the lead on that agenda instead of having them take the lead on the agenda. So to the extent that you guys can put together some feedback based on some of the comments that were made in February regarding both the district service statements and the budget requests and the responses to that, and how to get better understanding and transparency through that. If you could forward that to me, that would be.
May I ask a question?
Yes.
We all, or at least most, we were all invited to, I don't know how many of us took advantage of the invitation, we were all invited to fill out a survey, both to OMB and to city planning. So it might help generate the agenda to look at those survey responses.
I'll follow up with OMB. They are not going to take the lead on leading the discussion, however, so I'll ask them for those responses, but I think to the extent that you guys have those thoughts already laid out, or could lay them out and forward them to me, this way I can give the agencies enough time to review, and then we can have an actual conversation, so it's not just, here's our issue, we can actually talk about it in a meaningful way.
Quick question, we got, I guess the questionnaire, but they wanted as a group about the meeting dates in September. How are we handling that? They asked us our suggestions when our availability was. Did you guys?
For the budget consultations, you mean?
Yeah. This is for our availability. So I didn't realize I submitted dates that we were available in September. They wanted as a group. How are we taking care of that?
Traditionally, OMB has resolved that, and I gave my individual feedback, which was
Did they tell me take it up? Did you get a response?
no.
But thank you very much.
The dates of the district service cabinet meeting you have it scheduled for September and your board meeting date. So if we give them that, they'll work around everybody's dates for that. That's usually how it's done. Correct?
I thought we were all responding individually too, and then they were going to do the quilt themselves.
Well, you discussed this with your other district managers, was her response from Karen, and was the email I got. I submitted dates, and that's what the response was.
Yeah, I think it's just the dates for the DSC and your board meeting, and then they'll figure out with all the boards if there's any conflicts.
So maybe Laura, get back to her and say that we talked about it here at the meeting and everybody thought that their individual responses were sufficient, and if not, she'd better email each and every one of us.
Yeah, I didn't understand that response. I'm like, I never.
And they'll be here April.
Okay, thank you.
Bizarre.
Okay. And thank you very much, everyone.
Thanks, Andrew.
About legislation, what legislation we're looking at? What was you saying? The very first thing.